This is the Get Real Clinic podcast with Dr. Masterson.
What's up, guys? My name is Dr. Masterson. Welcome to the Get Real Clinic podcast, where we know that in order to have really great outcomes, really great results, you've got to be able to get real in clinic. And today we're talking about something very relevant, and that is something that we all experience in clinical practice: generational differences in the workplace, especially the clinical workplace. It's a really hot topic. There was recently a New York Times article about the differences between millennial and Gen Z surgeons and the older boomer and Gen X surgeons in our approach to patient care. That translates all the way to the ground floor, to the front desk staff, to the MAs, to the RNs, all across the clinical workspace. So let's take time to dive into what this really means for us as clinical providers, as clinical practitioners, as doctors, as surgeons, as clinic managers. Just reminding everyone, the way the podcast works is we're going to talk a little bit about this up top, and then we're going to split off into providers, leaders, and then also clinical support staff, nurses, MAs, so that we can kind of come together from each perspective and have real meaningful dialogues in the clinic. My hope, my goal, my dream is that you'll take these guides, you'll talk about them together, and it will create better, more meaningful, authentic relationship. Use the curriculum as an excuse to form great relationships in the clinic. So I'm sure everyone has found themselves in a space where they have an expectation, or they have some type of a communication that goes awry or off based on a generational difference, a difference between what people believe the way work should be done and the way it is actually done. And then we attribute this to the stereotype of when the person was born, whether it be in the 60s, the 70s, or in the end of the 90s. So let's take some time to break it down and understand it better. All right, practitioners, surgeons, doctors, providers of all types, leaders in medical practices, what are the pain points when it comes to generational differences? Here's what I typically hear. They don't take any initiative, or they want flexibility. I can't offer that. I can't offer you a work from home MA position. Or they need constant feedback. I feel like every time I'm turning around, I'm reminding them of the same thing. Or they clock out when things aren't done. Like, it's 5 o'clock, yeah, but we've got a bunch more things on the plate we've got to take care of. Or I'm trying to create a culture of ownership, but like no one wants to buy in. I don't get it. Why does this happen? Lean into this. Every generation believes the generation younger or below them is insufficient, lazy, inadequate. There are texts from the Greeks in 400 BC that have complaints about younger generations. There are writings in the 1750s from clergy people who would have complaints about people younger than them. This is not going anywhere. People that work with people that are younger than them have an interpretation of laziness, or a spirit of laziness that exists within that group of people. There was a recent, I was talking about this earlier, there's a recent New York Times article chastising younger surgeons from older surgeons, saying they weren't willing to work at the same type of rate or level that older surgeons were. This doesn't come from differences in generational time period as much as it does the way someone was raised, the technology they were exposed to, and the economic potential or opportunity that the person had. This influenced greatly their ideology and framework in the world. Now, it's not as important to understand how that generational upbringing or unique upbringing influences them now. It's more important to lean into the communication that those thoughts lead to. Right? There's a lot of literature around, okay, boomers want loyalty, Gen X wants independence, millennials want meaning, and Gen Z wants autonomy and wellness, right? Like that exists, but we get so lost in the stereotypes that we miss the person that's part of that generation. And so a lot of times our support staff will disengage because the deliverables aren't clear, right? We as leaders will see the entire workforce through the values that we have internally that we aren't communicating, right? It should be, it should be imperative that if there's work to be done after 5 o'clock, you just do it, right? That should be intuitive, right? That is a assumption that leads to a lot of poor communication. Or finally, we often are attracted and promote people who work the same way we do. So if I have a certain work style, a certain work ethic, a certain value set, and I find someone who has that same value set, that same work ethic, I want them close to me in leadership. I want to promote them. That's what typically leads to advancement. And now you're creating a lot of homogeny within the workforce and the leadership team. You're not going to get a lot of disparity of ideas. And honestly, the more that starts to grow within the team itself, the less tolerance there is for different ideologies. So being intentional about expectations, about the deliverables, about what we expect of people is really important, more than it is to understand the generation they come from. So lean into this point. I don't want you to miss it. It's probably the most important. If you don't remember anything I say, hear this. Generational difference, that doesn't mean you have to be different. So if you're a clinic owner, if you're a leader, if you're a surgeon, and you want to practice a certain way, don't feel bad about wanting to practice that way. You just have to be authentic and communicate those expectations up front. So if you have a bunch of people saying, I want to work from home, I love that. I love that you want to work from home. I don't have a position like that here. We get lost in the interpretation. If I don't say that that's possible, that the person's going to interpret me as a bad person, and then it's going to lead to like some chaos, and I'm going to be blasted. No. Don't be different because you believe there's a generational difference. Just be authentic and honest. We want to take care of business. We want to get with the program. We want to start adulting, or we want to stand on business, right? We want to be authentic. So what are some tactical steps that we can take as leaders, to surgeons, providers, in order to bridge the gap or bridge the divide? Number one, most important, is be very authentic on culture. Say what's appropriate. Say what's not appropriate. Don't change what you expect in order to make someone else feel more included, because that authenticity is eventually going to bubble up and people are going to find out, oh, that's not okay. And it's just going to let that person feel ostracized. The next is try to understand, regardless of the generation the person comes from, what motivates them. Why are they there? That we overcomplicate that question. Hey, what motivates you? If you ask somebody what motivates you, they're going to be like, I want to say money, but that feels like really shallow. Ask them what they do outside of work. Be intentional about having a conversation. If somebody spends all their time talking about their children, I know it motivates them. If somebody spends all their time talking about their hobby, I know it motivates them. If somebody spends all their time talking about how they're in school, I know it motivates them. A lot of times we overcomplicate, like, well, this person is born in 1984 and they've got this many kids. And what are they talking about? Because that is why they're there, right? That's what they're trying to accomplish. The motivation is going to make them feel more engaged. And it's going to let you lead to a more authentic relationship. And the second part of this, being intentional in tactical steps, is making the person feel like, I see you. Like I see what you're trying to do. There's this something called the platinum rule. Everybody's probably heard the golden rule, right? You want to treat others how you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treating other people how they want to be treated. And a lot of times we use that predisposition in our own minds of like, this is how I'd want to be treated, so I'm going to do that. Well, I in order to really say great job to that person, I'm going to get them a $50 gift card to Outback Steakhouse because that's what I would want. Well, maybe they don't want that, right? Being authentic about the communication. We give them that $50 gift card from Outback and they're like, gee, thanks. It must be a generational difference, right? No, you just missed the boat on what really motivates them, right? So getting engaged and having a dialogue will allow you to understand what motivates them, which is independent of their generational upbringing. Finally, be really intentional. I told the same thing to the staff. Be really intentional about deliverables. If you want staff to stay until the work is done, tell them that. If you want staff to be in clinic 15 minutes before the bell rings, tell them that. Here's a great example. The phrase, early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable, is something that not everyone has heard. If you want to lead and practice that way, communicate it up front. And don't say that I expect everybody to be here at 8 o'clock and then get upset when people get here at 7:59. Say on time is 7:45. We start at 7:45. Being really intentional about deliverables, we often find ourselves judging others on their interpretation of work and effort based on our own predispositions, so don't do that. So finally, I'm going to say it one more time. Generational differences don't mean that you have to be different. You want to communicate your expectations. You want to be clear about culture. You want to make sure you have a conversation and understand what motivates people. And here's the secret to that. They're going to talk about that the most. And finally, make sure people feel seen so that you know how to encourage them. All of the generational research, you can boil down to those 4 ideologies. I hope you guys have a conversation with your staff about this. Thanks so much for joining us. if you wouldn't mind subscribing, leaving us a review, sharing this with somebody else, it would really help us. We hope you can get real and have great results. Thanks, guys.